All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest on the channel today. Introducing Luis Scott-Vargas, MTG legend. How are you doing, LSV?
I'm doing great. This is going to be a lot of fun. I've seen videos like this, and I'm excited to take a crack at it.
So why don't you go ahead, for those who don't know who you are, introduce yourself a little bit, and tell us what you know about Yu-Gi-Oh!
Sure. My name's Luis Scott-Vargas, often called LSV, and I've been kind of doing it all in Magic for about 20 years. I'm a member of the Hall of Fame from, doing well in tournaments. I write articles and do videos. I do a podcast every week, limited resources. I've kind of been around the block when it comes to Magic, and what's funny is I've never played Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't actually know the rules. I know a little bit about it. I know about Pot of Greed, Blue Eyes, White Dragon, kind of know what the cards look like. I know there are traps, but in terms of actual how do you play a game of Yu-Gi-Oh!, I've never done it.
So this will be a lot of fun then. So what we're going to be doing today is I'm going to be showing you Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, and as I show you some, I'm also going to explain to you the rules and some of the basic mechanics. And based off of your knowledge and mastery of Magic, you're going to try to evaluate these to see, from your perspective, if you feel like these cards are worthy of being banned or not by Yu-Gi-Oh! Standards. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, perfect. So obviously, since your knowledge is very limited about Yu-Gi-Oh!, let's go ahead and start off with an easy one. Let's start with a monster card. So this is a little critter known as Sangan. So the rules of Yu-Gi-Oh! Are very similar to Magic. We each start with 8,000 life points. The object of the game is to reduce your opponent's life points to 0. So instead of having creatures like in Magic, we have monsters, effectively the same thing. So how we are able to play our monsters, in Magic, you have mana that you use to pay the cost. For Yu-Gi-Oh!, monster cards can just be summoned to the field. We get what's called a normal summon, which allows you to, once per turn, place a monster on the field, either in face-up attack position, which is vertically oriented like you see in this picture, or set that monster in face-down defense position. So it hides the identity, so there's some unknown information there. And depending if it's in attack or defense position, that's what stat is currently being applied. We also have what's known as a special summon, and special summons are very frequent. They're basically extra summons you get in addition to your normal summon each turn. And there's no limitation on special summons. We'll see a few of those cards later on here. So why don't you go ahead and give Sangan a read here?
Right. So Sangan's a little dude. 1,600 is just not very big as far as I know. But when it dies, you get to go search up a different monster, or I guess the same one. Looks like you could grab another copy of this. I would not be surprised if this is banned. I'm actually going to guess that it got banned. The repeated being able to get more copies of these and then just be able to play them sounds pretty great to me.
Sure. So just right off the bat, you think this is banned. That's it.
Yeah, that's going to be my guess.
Sure. So starting off somewhat strong, this was banned at some point. Very early on in Yu-Gi-Oh!'s history, this card, as you mentioned, you were able to search multiple copies of itself. There's also another card called Witch of the Black Forest, which is effectively also Sangan, but instead of for 1,500 or less attack, it lets you search for 1,500 or less defense. So we actually had even more searchers that could search the same copies of themselves. And you can see how that could get really out of hand, right?
Yeah.
So early on, both of these cards were either banned or actually limited to a single copy. I'm not sure if Magic does like limitations at all, or if they just solely do bans.
Yeah, restriction is what it's called. It'd be restricted to one, but that's only in like the oldest, most powerful Magic format. Most formats just their tools are to ban a card if they want to get rid of a card.
Understood. So you have context moving forward. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is an eternal format, so we are allowed. This card was actually printed in the second set ever made, and is still legal today, as a matter of fact. But it was banned for a long time, and they actually changed the effect on this card and errated it and brought it back later, and now it's actually unlimited. You're allowed to play 3 copies of this card. What they changed is they allowed you to still do the same effect, but you're not allowed to use the same, you're not allowed to use the card that you search the turn that you search it, so that limits the power of the card quite a bit. And you're also only able to use the effect of this card once in a given turn. So you couldn't spam multiple just to, dig super deep into your deck or anything like that.
Right.
So not too bad. I mean, you evaluated that. It is very powerful, and by old standards it was. But let's go ahead and move on to the next of the trinity of cards in Yu-Gi-Oh!, a spell card. So let me get that pulled up for you here. This card is Graceful Charity. So how spell cards work, they are essentially the same as, I believe, sorceries in Magic, where during your turn, you're allowed to activate this card. And again, with Magic, you have mana to pay the cost of cards. In Yu-Gi-Oh, you're allowed to activate as many spell cards from your hand as many times as you want. Unless the card says otherwise or restricts you in some way or another, spell cards are allowed to be played in mass. And that's, part of the appeal of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is you get to play all these cards at rapid pace. So Graceful Charity is a super simple card here. You want to give it a read?
Oh, yeah. It's draw 3 cards, discard 2 cards. And so, again, this is another card that might look a little innocuous, but in Magic, effectively a free 0 mana draw 3 discard 2 would be unbelievably broken. One of the best cards in the game. I've got to guess that this also got banned. I just don't see a reason why you wouldn't play the max number of these possible. It just makes your deck so much more consistent.
Is there any card in Magic that is analogous to this?
I mean, honestly, the closest is probably a card called Gitaxian Probe, which lets you look at their hand and it draws you a card. So it replaces itself, you look at their hand, and it's free to play. It costs you 0 mana, which is the main resource. You do have to pay 2 life to play it, but that's a pretty minor cost. And that card got banned in most formats, restricted in the one format that does restrictions. So that's probably the closest analogy, though. One of the best Magic cards of all time, Ancestral Recall, part of the Power 9, is just 1 mana to draw 3 cards. That would also be somewhat similar, but either way, Graceful Charity, I don't know, looks like a busted card to me.
Well, you would be correct, because Graceful Charity is in fact banned, and has been banned, I want to say since 2005, so it has been banned for almost 20 years now. And as you said, there is no chance this card is ever going to be legal again, because similar to Magic, I imagine, the graveyard is, of course, essentially a second hand in a lot of instances, so it may not be Pot of Greed, where, you're using 1 card to draw 2, but fueling the graveyard, Graceful Charity is incredibly powerful. And by modern standards, like you said, this would be played in max copies in every deck possible. So, all right, you are on a good streak so far. Let's finish the trinity of types of Yu-Gi-Oh cards, so then we can start getting to some of the good stuff. So this is Ring of Destruction. This is a trap card. So how trap cards work is, unlike spell cards, trap cards have to be set face down for the turn that you set them. And then afterwards, they can either be flipped up and activated at instant speed, either during your opponent's turn or even during your own turn, if it's the turn after it was already set. So, again, you're able to set, 3 or 4 of these face down if you have them in your hand, and then after that turn passes, you can fire them at will if you wish, just for context. So Ring of Destruction, another simple card. Go ahead and give this one a read.
Yeah, so it's a trap, and it just says destroy a face-up monster and inflict damage to both players equal to its attack. So the only cost to this is you have to wait a turn, basically?
Correct, yes. So you can't activate it immediately. You just have to set it face down, and then once I pass play to you, at any point during your turn, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has phases similar to Magic. I'm able to activate this card, and I can use the effect.
This one's closer to me. I could see why this would be very good. My guess is it's not banned, but that's just because you're trading just 1 for 1. You're both taking damage, and you do have to wait a turn for it. But it wouldn't surprise me if it was banned. I'm going to guess that it's not banned, though.
All right, and you are correct. This is not banned. This card actually was banned for a short period of time, but not for the reason you might think. So the main reason this card was banned is actually the last part of text that says inflict damage to both players' life points equal to its attack. The issue with this is that this actually, in some instances, if a player was losing, but both players' life points were low, would actually force draws. And so no one really wants to deal with draws, especially in tournaments. And so they actually banned this card. It was actually quite good in old Yu-Gi-Oh! Just 1 for 1 spot removal was actually totally fine. But then you could also, let's say you're really ahead on life and your opponent is low. As soon as you set Ring of Destruction, if you have any monster on the field, as soon as they start their turn, you can Ring of Destruction your own monster and win the game immediately. So
right, you
that's
can
not
hit your
particularly
own stuff
fun.
With this. That does make sense.
Exactly. So what they actually did was they errated it and brought it back. And the new text says you have to target an opponent's monster. That monster has to have less attack than your opponent's life points. And to avoid the draw situation, they made it so that you take the damage first and then your opponent takes the damage. So they put a lot of restrictions on it. And as you can imagine now, the card is not very good. So it is at 3 copies. Okay, so that's effectively the trinity of cards that are available in Yu-Gi-Oh! So now you sort of have an understanding of what we're working with here. So I'm going to show you a card now. This is a much newer card. There's a little bit of text on this, but a lot of it's just kind of redundant. So there's only 2 main things that this card does. Why don't you go ahead and give this card a read here?
Dino Wrestler Pankratops. If your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can special summon this card from your hand. You can only special summon this once per turn this way. And it's got a quick effect. You contribute 1 Dino Wrestler monster, then target 1 card your opponent controls and destroy it. You can only use this effect once per turn. So is tribute like discarding a Dino Wrestler or something like that?
So tributing is when the monster is on the field, you would send it to the graveyard.
Okay, so sacrificing.
Yes, sacrificing, effectively, yes.
Gotcha.
And so quick effect means that it's an instant speed effect. So you're able to use this during either your turn or your opponent's turn at instant speed, in reaction to something else, for example.
And this can destroy other cards other than just monsters too.
It says target 1 card, correct?
Well, this card seems really strong. So you get to special summon it if they just have more than you do, which means they start with 1 monster. You just immediately play this first and then start playing things the normal way. I guess I don't know what other Dino Wrestlers there are, if there's like really cheap ones or ones that like have effects when you tribute them or something, ways to make that second ability cheaper. Mm-hmm. The whole package here looks really good. I guess I would guess this did get banned. It looks pretty obnoxious too. Just having this in a deck with a ton of Dino Wrestlers means that like it's pretty hard to make any sort of headway on board when they can always just trade 1 for 1. So yeah, the being able to play this for free, I guess, is the reason I would say this is pretty strong.
Okay, final answer.
Yeah.
All right. Well, actually, this may shock you. That is incorrect. This card has not been banned, which is kind of absurd because this card, it reads like a ridiculous card, as you mentioned. It's been limited. It has been limited, I will say, but it has not yet made its way onto the ban list. But this is a very strong card to sort of equalize going second. I imagine in Magic it's similar, where going first is, a very strong advantage. And there's a handful of cards that are similar to this. You mentioned other Dino Wrestlers. Realistically, you don't care about any of the other Dino Wrestlers. Quite frankly, a lot of the other Dino Wrestlers are not very good. People would just play this card in their sideboards, and if they knew that they were going to be going second, they would board this card in and have a really strong edge going second, depending on what the opponent was going to be doing. Something else you may have potentially missed, this card has 2,600 attack points, which is massive. So this could basically just have a huge presence on the board to make it so that it can run over your opponent's monsters. And then if your opponent tries to do anything to this card, at quick effect speed, you can just tribute it off and just destroy one of your opponent's cards. So as you said, it is a very obnoxious card to deal with. So I think you identified that part of it pretty well. But as far as Yu-Gi-Oh goes, it's kind of crazy that a card like this is legal and is still played.
Looks pretty good to me.
Yeah, it's a solid card. Yu-Gi-Oh has some pretty crazy cards. Is there anything like this in Magic at all?
There are some cards. So they've been experimenting with more digital designs on Magic Arena that care about who went first or second. So there's effects like if you were the starting player, this card is worse. Whereas if you went second, this card becomes better. It's even explicitly written on the card, which is kind of funny. So that aspect of the card certainly does exist. And then there's definitely been a lot of equalizer type cards where if they're ahead, do this. There's a card in the new set, which is if they have more cards than you, draw a card. If they have more creatures than you, put 2 creatures into play. If they have more lands than you get a treasure. Every sort of metric, if you're behind on life, you gain life, kind of tries to catch you up. And that does look somewhat similar here.
That's cool. Yeah, I think over time, because obviously both of our games are quite old at this point.
Yeah.
It's cool to see how they're still experimenting with design space and what's still available. But nice. All right, let's move on to the next one. I'm going to give you a break from long card text here. We're going to go back to a simple card. You mentioned that Gitaxian Probe card. This might be a little bit similar.
The Forceful Sentry. So it's a spell, lets you look at their hand, choose a card, and shuffle that, and make them shuffle it into their deck. So basically, a 1-for-1 again, you're trading 1 card for 1 card, but you get just to take the best card out of their hand and make them shuffle it back into their deck. This is close because on the one hand, this card looks incredibly obnoxious. I wouldn't want to play against 3 copies of this on a regular basis. It really does also press who goes first, since if you open on this on the play, you can really mess up their hand. I'm not sure. It feels like in Yu-Gi-Oh, people empty their hands pretty quickly, which might be a kind of a drawback here.
You mentioned the Gitaxian Probe. That just lets you look at the hand. You're not really interacting with it. Aside
right. You get the card back because you draw a card. So it's still kind of a 1-for-1. This, you don't draw a card, but you get to make them, use one of their cards. I guess I'm going to guess this got banned because it was too annoying, not necessarily because it was just too good, though it does seem pretty strong.
Sure. Final answer.
Yeah.
Well, you are correct. It was banned, and there's multiple reasons for its banning. So this card was released in the third set, I want to say, for Yu-Gi-Oh! And there were multiple cards that were similar to this. Another one was called Confiscation, where you pay 1,000 life points, look at their hand, and you get to discard the card instead of shuffling it back into the deck like this card. And then the third card, called Delinquent Duo, says pay 1,000 and then randomly discard a card out of your opponent's hand, and then your opponent also discards a card out of their hand. So it's a 1 for 2 effectively.
Yeah.
But there's a degree of randomness to it. So these were known as the unholy trinity of like hand destruction. And back then you were able to play all these at 3 copies for a very short period of time. So 9 hand destruction cards. And again, there's no mana system in Yu-Gi-Oh! So you can kind of see where this is going, right?
Yeah. Someone just opens with 2 or 3 copies and their opponent never
It's a
does
non-game
anything.
at that point. Yeah. So these got limited very, very quickly. And then similar to Graceful Charity, I believe they got banned around the same time. One thing that's very interesting, and I'm not sure if this philosophy is also true for Magic, is that hand knowledge in Yu-Gi-Oh! Specifically is very debilitating just because of the fact that the games can end so quickly that having full hand knowledge, especially on turn 1, can mean that you're essentially going to know everything your opponent has, and the game is effectively going to be over. I'm not sure if Magic, like hand knowledge, is in a similar situation, but I'd be curious to hear.
Yeah, it kind of depends on the speed of the games. Like you said, the faster a game is, the more important it is to look at their hand. And there's some formats that really a lot of the gameplay revolves around that, and some that it's less so. But a card like this in Magic would be very strong. In fact, there's a card called Thoughtseize where you pay 2 life and you look at their hand, you make them discard a card. Like that's exactly the same. And that card, that card was printed originally in like 2008, and it's gotten reprinted a bunch of times, and it's always been one of the best cards in any format that it exists.
That I could see why. I could also see people really hating to play against it as well.
Yep, there's definitely that too.
Well, let's get on to another trap card. As you can see, we're going Monster Spell Trap just to keep some variety here. This is another simple one, though.
All right, Solemn Judgment. When a monster or monsters would be summoned or a spell/trap card is activated, pay half your life points, negate the summoner activation, and destroy that card.
So before you get into it, one thing I also want to specify here is next to where it says trap card at the top, you see that there's that little arrow symbol.
Yeah.
That's to signify that this is called a counter trap. So spells and traps have what are called subtypes, which sort of divide them into certain categories. What a counter trap is that if a counter trap card is activated in response to another card being activated, the only thing that is allowed to respond to a counter trap is yet another counter trap. So it essentially closes the window or limits the window of what other types of cards are allowed to be used to respond in response to this particular card. So I'm not sure if Magic has any other types of mechanics similar to that, but I just want to give you that clarification here while you evaluate this.
Yeah, there's a similar mechanic called Split Second, where when a card with Split Second gets played, nothing can respond to it. Not even another card with Split Second. It's just this card is going to happen and nothing can happen before that.
Sure.
And then Magic actually originally had Counter Trap, basically had interrupts, which only could be responded to with other interrupts, which sounds like about exactly the same. And
sounds exactly the same.
Basically all count. Wow. It's hard for me to not want to say this also should have gotten banned, just because it can trade for anything. Half your life points is definitely a real cost. Like the second one of these can be pretty costly, for example. I think just being able to counter, this counters a monster, a spell/trap card. It looks like it can counter a summon or an activation. So yeah, that's them casting a monster or using a spell or trap.
The only thing this doesn't stop, I can clarify here, is if a monster uses its effect, it can't stop that. That is one thing that this card doesn't stop. But I mean, it basically stops everything else. So.
I'm going to say this got banned. Games coming down to who drew more of these because it can stop their important cards. Like this is a very similar to the last card. It just does it a different way, which is it's going to stop their card. In this case, the cost of half your life, but that's because it also stops a card once they've spent the resources to play that card, which is a pretty big difference. So yeah, I'm going to say Solemn Judgment got banned. That is my Solemn Judgment.
Final answer. And that answer is, this may shock you, incorrect. This card is legal at 3 right now in Yu-Gi-Oh!
It seems like a good card.
It is. I will say, similar to a lot of the cards I have showed you, by older Yu-Gi-Oh! Standards, this card was banned. But for the purposes of what I'm quizzing you on, it's for whether or not the card is banned actually right now. But Solemn Judgment is a very strong card. Similar to what I was saying with Dino Wrestler Pankratops and when players are going second, some people will have Solemn Judgments in their sideboard for when they know they're going to go first to ensure that their opponents aren't going to be able to stop any of their plays that they're making in their first turn. The life point cost can be hefty, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a game where, I mean, similar to a lot of games, your last life point's the only one that matters. And the cool thing about Solemn Judgment is you can always pay half. So the card is theoretically always live, even if you have, 5 life points. It works. And what's cool about Solemn Judgment is that since it is a counter trap, you can Solemn Judgment your opponent's Solemn Judgment. So if you're both playing them, there's some fun interplay there. But yes, extremely strong card. You hit every note, but what is insane about the pace and speed of Yu-Gi-Oh!, which I'm not sure how it compares to a format like Vintage for Magic, a card like this can be at 3, and it's actually totally fine.
Yeah, I suppose if you're going second, this card might just be too slow some of the games.
Right, precisely. Okay, moving on to the next one though. You see, you've got your analysis is pretty spot on, though, so I'm very impressed. All right, this is another one that has a little bit of text on it. This is a newer card, but this is a card that I think a lot of people would be curious to hear your thoughts on.
All right, Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. So it's a zombie/tuner/effect, huh?
For the purposes of this, none of that matters.
Gotcha. When a card or effect is activated that includes any of these effects, quick effect, you can discard this card and negate that effect. Add a card from the deck to the hand, special summon from the deck, send a card from the deck to the graveyard, and you can only use this once per turn. You can discard this from your hand to counter these things?
Correct.
And you can only use one of these per turn.
So of those 3, you're only allowed to pick one because you can only use one copy of Ash Blossom in a single turn.
So they would cast a card or activate a card that's going to go get a card from their deck and put it in their hand. You can stop it, or summon a card from the deck, or send a card from the deck to the graveyard. Okay.
Correct.
All right, I'm going to guess this is not banned, but it does seem like a pretty good way to... Again, if you can ever stop a card that they spent resources activating, use their summon, for example, with a card just from your hand, no cost, that's pretty strong. But as a purely defensive card, I guess I wouldn't expect this to have been banned.
Okay. Final answer.
Yeah.
You are dead on. That is impressive. Yes. So Ash Blossom, I will say, is still to this day. This was printed, I want to say, in 2017. So not too long ago, relatively speaking. But this is one of the most played cards and has been since its printing because of how ubiquitous the effect is, right? Yu-Gi-Oh! Has tons of effects that add cards from deck to hand, that special summon from the deck, and send a card from the deck to the graveyard. Those are 3 of the most powerful effects in the game. And so to have a card that can sort of counter all of those effectively is really strong. But not strong enough that it's worthy of getting banned. It's not oppressive. It's not completely game ending in any capacity. It's just a really solid card, all things considered. So this is what is known as a hand trap. So it's not an actual trap card because it sort of functions like a trap card. We like to call it a hand trap. That's effectively a trap card that's activated from the hand. And it's a monster, so it has versatility. And if you don't want to use it for its effect, you could still play it on the field and use it for other things as well.
Yeah, I bet it doesn't get cast all that often on the field, but...
Not too often. Typically, since it does have 1,800 defense, there are a non-zero amount of times where you will play this in defense position to protect yourself if you are that desperate. But
gotcha.
Very seldom. Okay, this will be an interesting one for you to evaluate here. Let's throw another spell card your way.
Lightning Storm. If you control no face-up cards, activate one of these effects. Destroy all attack position monsters your opponent controls, or destroy all spells and traps your opponent controls, and you can only activate one of these per turn. So no face-up cards means you have no monsters in play, and when spells get activated, they go to the graveyard afterwards, right? So
that is true. The only exception to that rule is continuous spells, which essentially function as enchantments in Magic the Gathering, so they will stay on the field. And then we also have equip spells, which are the equivalent of artifacts. So those will also stay on the field unless the monster also goes to the graveyard. Right. There's also another subclass of trap card that are continuous traps, which again function like enchantments.
But I imagine you just wouldn't put those cards in your deck if you were planning on casting Lightning Storm. So.
Potentially.
Yeah, I'm going to guess this is not banned. It does seem good, being able to punish them for overextending, like whether that's on attacking monsters or spells and traps. Seems like it could be pretty punishing, but you also, like, there's a cost here, which is you can't have any face-up cards, which means your opponent can play around this. Like, if it looks like you're going to play a Lightning Storm, they can maybe, like, slow play a little bit. And if you've got stuff in play, you can't cast this, so there's going to be some times where you wouldn't be able to play it even if you wanted to. So I'm going to guess not banned on Lightning Storm.
Okay, let me ask you this. Is it weird seeing essentially a zero-cost board wipe?
Well, so yes and no, but part of it is a zero-cost board wipe in a game where you can deploy things fairly efficiently. That seems like it could be good counterplay, just because
sure.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the rule set of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is very different from Magic, because not having mana as a resource as a limiting factor means Yu-Gi-Oh! Starts like it's 0 to 60. You just start on turn 1 by playing just like incredibly strong cards. Magic has this like ramping up period. So board wipes in Magic tend to like cost 4 or 5 mana, being played on the 4th or 5th turn. It's just a very different game. Yet this card would obviously be incredibly busted in Magic, but every Yu-Gi-Oh! Spell would be, because Magic, you have to spend mana for your spells. When they're free, they get a lot more powerful. So
sure.
Every spell we've read, if it was in Magic at zero cost, would be absolutely too good for Magic. So that's just because it bypasses that. It is funny. Basically, everything in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just much more powerful because the main like limiter of what you can do has been removed. It's just of course it's kind of wild seeing that.
Yeah, we call it a battle cruiser Yu-Gi-Oh! Because everything's just getting thrown at the field as quickly as possible. And I'm sandbagging you because you are correct. Lightning Storm is not banned. I believe it's either been limited or semi-limited. We actually have a semi-limited list as well.
Is that 2 copies?
But 2 copies, yeah. A lot of people think it shouldn't exist because the difference between 2 and 3 is so marginal that it doesn't even matter. But that's neither here nor there. But Lightning Storm, very strong card. Everything you've said so far has been on point, but not good enough to be banned. Cards like this are necessary to sort of equalize the game, like you said. So you're doing spectacular. Let's go ahead and see if you can keep it up with this next one. Here's another trap card for you.
Return from the different dimension. Pay half your life points. Special summon as many of your banished monsters as possible. And then during your end phase, banish all monsters that were special summoned by this effect. I assume you can just immediately attack with them.
It doesn't say you can't. And for context, banished is the equivalent of exile in Magic.
Gotcha. I mean, this is just very clearly a combo card where if there's a way to banish a bunch of monsters and have monsters that are particularly good to just come in for one hit, whether they have like an effect you can use right away that's really good, or just maybe, I guess, a lot of stats. This is tricky because this is one where I could definitely see this as being like an engine card for a busted combo deck, but I would have to know how easy it is to banish monsters. Like, if there's a spell that like lets you banish 3 monsters from your deck, combined with this, it would just be completely out of control. I guess I'm going to guess this did get banned, but honestly, I could believe this either way because this is very context dependent based on what else is around it.
Sure, final answer.
Yeah, I'll guess that it did get banned.
All right, and the streak continues. You are correct. So this card has been banned for quite some time for all the reasons you mentioned. There are several cards. I don't want to say there's several cards that can immediately banish things directly from the deck, but there are plenty of ways, especially when this card was very prominent, that can banish cards at a fast enough pace that as soon as you would see this card essentially just spells win the game. And again, paying half your life points is completely trivial at that point. It's cool because you can bring back up to, so in Yu-Gi-Oh! We only have 5 monster zones, where I believe in Magic, there's no limit to how many you have. So there is a somewhat limitation on how crazy this card can get, but if you see lethal and you have this card set the turn prior and you have enough guys that are banished, you can just flip this up and just the game is immediately over at that point. There weren't many cards back in the day when this card was legal that there was a degree of counterplay to it. But what's also neat is that you can also use this card either defensively. So let's say your opponent's trying to lethal you can activate this, bring back all your monsters, and essentially create a big wall so that they can't pierce through it. Maybe buy yourself a turn. You're kind of desperate at that point, but it's not impossible. Or by bringing those monsters back to the field, you can then use them for either other types of summons or different plays as well. So a very powerful card, a very ban-worthy card, and as you said, you're not surprised to see it banned in the slightest. Okay, let us get to our next card here. This guy's one of my favorites. This guy looks really cool.
Makyura the Destructor.
Right on.
It's a 1600 attack, 1200 defense. Warrior. During the turn this card is sent to the graveyard, the owner of this card can activate trap cards from his or her hand. Ooh. This card seems cool. So when this thing dies, you get to bypass waiting a turn and just immediately have your traps just pop off. I'm going to guess this didn't get banned, but it does seem like it has a pretty cool effect. I mean, maybe making your traps go off a turn sooner is really busted, but I don't know. This card seems sweet. I'm going to guess it didn't get banned.
All right, final answer.
Yeah.
You are incorrect. The streak has ended. Makyura is an extremely busted card. Even by today's standards, people still lab with this. It's banned, but people lab the potential that this card would have if it still had its original effect. It's legal in the sense that they errated it, and now the errata says you can only activate one trap card.
I see.
Being able to activate unlimited trap cards was a bit too insane, and we've seen plenty of instances where people think, yeah, could this card have come back? Absolutely not. Makyura is insane. There's so many enablers, too, to get this card to the graveyard immediately compared to the old days as well. This card enabled a myriad of first-turn kill decks and was put on the ban list very quickly as a result.
Well, that's a big miss then.
Yeah, I mean, when you're sidestepping an entire mechanic of the game, I don't think it's too much of a surprise at the end of the day. But he still has really cool artwork. He's very Yu-Gi-Oh-like. All right. This is a very iconic card for Yu-Gi-Oh! And a very cool one at that. Let's see what you think of this one.
Gold Sarcophagus. It's a spell. Banish one card from your deck face up. During your second standby phase after this card's activation, add that card to your hand. So how many turns is that?
That is 2 turns. So the standby phase is effectively the upkeep in Magic the Gathering.
So you'd play this. Next turn, you wouldn't get it. Turn after, you'd get it at the start of your turn.
Correct.
Okay, I don't think that this was banned then. I do think, obviously, it's got some power to it. Having to wait 2 turns feels like an eternity in Yu-Gi-Oh! So I suspect this didn't get banned, but I'm sure it did enable some pretty good combos.
So this is a pretty cool one. Gold Sarcophagus, for a bit of trivia lore for you, was actually one of the first prize cards when Yu-Gi-Oh! Was first starting up its tournament circuit. I believe this was 2006 or 7, I want to say. This was the prize card that was awarded. So this was actually really hard to get your hands on. And back in the day, Gold Sarcophagus, when Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a slower game, Gold Sarcophagus was actually incredibly powerful because the games did go long enough that you see that second turn and actually searching the best card in your deck effectively was actually quite powerful. Over time, however, as you mentioned, the game has sped up rather rapidly, and getting to see your second turn sometimes isn't enough. But I will say, however, while this card is not banned, so you are correct, you can breathe a sigh of relief, it is actually limited. It's been limited. It's kind of gone all over the ban list, but it is limited because the fact that it banishes a card immediately out of your deck, you talked about cards to combo with something like Return from the Different Dimension that we looked at earlier. There are plenty of cards that either have an effect that activate when they get banished, or there's a way to retrieve that card from the banish zone to do something with it. So it sort of accelerates the speed of your deck. On paper, it would take 2 turns to get that card. By modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Standards, you're seeing that card immediately because of either the effect of that card itself or some other card to combo with it. So it's still a very strong card, but definitely not a ban-worthy card, if that makes sense. This one's gonna be interesting. So here is another trap card for you.
Vanity's Emptiness. Neither player can special summon monsters. When a card is sent from the deck or the field to your graveyard, destroy this card.
So I mentioned earlier about continuous traps. That's what that infinity symbol is next to the trap card text. So this card, when you activate it, at any point, it will stay on the field until either it gets destroyed by another card or its effect, in this case itself, can potentially destroy it.
Yeah, there's a bunch of cards similar to this in Magic, and basically they get banned if they're too obnoxious. This does seem pretty annoying, especially if you can build a deck where if they can't kill this and you're able to stop cards from going to your graveyard, you can make it so that maybe lock them out. They can't really do a whole lot. It does seem like it takes a lot of work to do that. Oh, man, this one's close because I could definitely believe that there's like maybe a 2-card combo with this that makes it really difficult to remove. Like in Magic, there's a card similar where if a card goes to your graveyard, you destroy it, but you play it with cards that say no cards can go to the graveyard, for example.
I see.
Or like banish any card that would go to the graveyard, stops that drawback.
Sure.
So if there's a card like that, I'm going to guess this did not get banned, but it is obnoxious enough that I could believe it if it ends up as it was.
All right, final answer.
Yeah.
So Vanity's Emptiness is an interesting card. This card, I believe, was first released in 2011, 2012, so about midway through Yu-Gi-Oh's lifespan. And it's interesting because on release, everyone kind of just passed on this card. No one really gave it any attention. It was, especially because if you look at the drawback that it destroys itself, and you have to think too, since it destroys itself if any of your cards go to the graveyard, that means your opponent can pop any other card, and then that will basically get them a 2-for-1, essentially. So a lot of people actually thought this card was very bad. Then, a few years later, people came to their senses and realized, wait, special summoning is essentially the most ubiquitous way to play Yu-Gi-Oh! And if I set up a board and go first and set Vanity's Emptiness, as soon as my opponent's turn starts, if I just flip this card, they are basically locked out of doing anything, especially because Yu-Gi-Oh! Became very monster-centric as it progressed. And so there was a lot of special summoning, a lot of monsters trying to get onto the field to do X or Y. And so people would either have this in their main deck or their side deck. They would flip this as soon as their opponent's turn starts, and now all of a sudden the opponent can't play the game, and next turn they just attack and kill them. So it was a very obnoxious card and was banned not long after people figured out how oppressive that this card was.
So it basically, this card ended up just needing one turn. Like, you just play this, and if they can't answer your stuff in one turn, then that's enough usually to win.
Yeah, so essentially people would set up a board where on their first turn they would summon monsters that would have, 2,500, 3,000 attack, and they would summon several of them. And they would play them very defensively, and then they would set Vanity's Emptiness in their back row. Turn would pass over to you. They immediately flip Vanity's Emptiness. It becomes very difficult for you to play the game because essentially half of your hand is locked, because that's how you play, is special summoning monsters typically. And so they can't really do much. They might be able to set one monster to defend themselves. Then all the turn player has to do, who controls Vanity's Emptiness, is turn everything to attack position and just attack and kill them. You're also able to turn off Vanity's Emptiness yourself if you just activate any spell card, for instance, use that effect, and then Vanity's Emptiness will go to the grave. So now all of a sudden you're able to special summon again during your turn. And so now you can see why it would be very oppressive in that regard.
Definitely. Or play a second one of these and then pass and then flip it again.
Yep. And so I believe they actually limited this card to 1 before banning it. And at 1, it was arguably even more oppressive, just because then it was really sacky, because it's like they had the 1 copy of it. And now you're just like, oh, I guess you drew the 1 of, like, cool, I guess we don't get to play this game out. Very, very annoying card. Very annoying card. Speaking of potentially annoying cards, here is a really cool design. A really cool design.
That grass looks greener. It's a spell. If you have more cards in your deck than your opponent does, send cards from the top of your deck to the graveyard so you have the same number of cards in your deck as your opponent.
So for some context here, Yu-Gi-Oh's deck size limit, we have a minimum of 40 and we have a maximum of 60.
I see. So when you put this card in your deck, you build a deck like that max size or close to it, so that this almost always mills a bunch of cards. Because I assume the average deck is at exactly 40, because that's usually what's the smartest thing to do. Yeah, this is completely just, if there's a combo card where like sending 15 cards to your graveyard is really strong, then this card looks like it would potentially be bannable. If there isn't, then this card, there's a lot of formats where this card would just do nothing.
Sure.
I'm going to go ahead and guess. I'm going to guess this did get banned. I'm going to say that it enabled some kind of combo. It's a complete shot in the dark.
So you are correct. This card is banned. I am going based off of, so we technically have 3 different formats. The non-Asian regions abide by like a different ban list than the Asian regions. And then our arena equivalent, Master Duel, also has its own restricted list. So it's kind of confusing. But in the version that we are going by here, the TCG, this card is banned. And for the reason that you mentioned, there isn't necessarily a particular combo piece that getting 20 cards into the graveyard enables. It's more the fact that you get to mill 20 cards to the graveyard, and you build your deck in such a way that, half of those cards are going to have some effect that activates in the graveyard, or you can use it from the graveyard in some capacity. So it's effectively like you have, 12 cards virtually to your opponent's 5. In the first turns. This card was really fascinating when it was released, because once players figured out that they could take advantage of this, the 60 became the new 40, and people were just only playing 60 card decks, essentially to counteract the fact that their opponent might be playing That Grass Looks Greener, even if they themselves weren't playing it.
That's really funny.
So Yeah, it encouraged a lot of really interesting deck building. And like you said, playing the minimum amount of cards is, typically the best because that's going to maximize your chances of seeing the cards that you want. But this encouraged a different way to deck build. And even now to this day, people sometimes don't always play 40. 60 is sometimes still common because the amount of what we call starter cards or cards to really get your combos going might be high enough that if you run the probability, you're reducing the likelihood you're going to maybe draw a combo piece that you don't want to see in your hand. So it actually makes sense for you to play more cards in your deck than 40 to sort of like combat that. So it's really shifted how people look at deck building in the past few years since this card was released. But it's a really cool card. Like in card design, it's cool. In application, it is the worst feeling to play again.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, only a few left, and I think I've saved the best few for last year, so I'm really excited to see your thoughts on these. All right, this is a cool one.
All right, Victory Dragon. It's a 2400 3000. That's pretty big. This card cannot be special summoned. To tribute summon this card, you must tribute 3 dragon-type monsters, and if this card attacks your opponent directly and reduce their life points to 0, you win the match. Is Yu-Gi-Oh! Best 2 out of 3 then? Is that typically how it's played?
Yeah, and by tournament play standards, yes, it's best 2 out of 3.
And you can't special summon this, and then to summon it, you have to tribute 3 dragons.
And to remind you, tributing, if you have 3 dragons on your field, you just send those all to the graveyard, and then you play this card in their place.
And what's the starting life total?
8,000.
I'm going to guess this didn't get banned. This looks like a really cool card, and I could see... like, you get cheesed out by this, like, it would probably be the worst feeling. But I alternate wins that this, first of all, you have to win the game. So a lot of the time, winning one game is already enough because you've already won a game. Like, it's not necessarily going to win you 2 games when it kills them. It's a 2400, so you need like 3 hits-ish to kill them. Slightly more, actually. And you have to sack 3 dragons to play it. So I'm going to guess this didn't get banned, even though I bet it's a funny card.
It's a neat card, right? It wins you the whole match. Like, you could be down a game and you just all of a sudden win and turn around. But interestingly enough, you're incorrect. This card is actually banned and has been banned for quite some time. So there's a bit of context here. It's something you might have actually overlooked entirely. I'm not sure if the rules for competitive Magic might differ or not for the way that this might work. But one of the reasons this card initially got banned, this is a very old card for context. In Japan, in the Asian territories, you actually, when it is not your turn, you were not allowed to concede the game to your opponent. And so one of the weird parts about this is that in theory, as soon as your opponent plays Victory Dragon on the field, you could just concede the game and not let them get that attack in, which means they would automatically win the match, right? But in the Asian territories, the non-turn player wasn't allowed to concede, which made Victory Dragon actually, like, potentially a feasible win condition. And there are some ways to sort of like make this card a lot more plausible to summon. And you're typically only going to summon this when your opponent is low enough to get that final hit in. And back in the day, it was a lot easier to do that just because of the way Yu-Gi-Oh was. By today's standards, this card could come back and no one would play it. It's not good. But it's kind of weird to see that there's a card that sort of has this rule to the game that's like outside the game itself. That's like
definitely
you win the
some
match.
Metagame text, right. A little bit of fourth wall breaking there,
Right. I'm not sure if like Magic has anything to that degree, but
no, they have some, but not a ton. Yeah.
This is a really cool card.
Time Tearing Morganite. It's a spell. For the rest of the duel, apply the following effects. You can't activate monster effects in the hand. Draw 2 cards instead of 1 for your normal draw during your draw phase. And you can conduct 2 normal summons / sets per turn, not just 1. You can banish this card from your graveyard, then discard 1 Time Tearing Morganite. Your opponent can't activate monster effects when you normal summon this turn. What does that mean?
The last part of the effect?
Yeah, when you normal summon, what is that them activating monster effects?
So similar to, if you recall, the Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, let's say, there are monster effects that can activate either as quick effects or even the Pankratops card that can be activated as soon as you would normal summon a monster. They can be activated at instant speed to respond to that normal summon, if that makes sense.
Can you then respond to them by discarding one of these and banishing it from your graveyard?
So because Time Tearing Morganite is a spell card, you would use this at sorcery speed.
I see. So
if that makes sense.
you would start by banishing, just to get the last effect here, you would start by banishing this and then discarding one, and then you would normal summon after that, and they couldn't do anything.
Correct. Essentially, yes.
Gotcha. But it also is a spell that just says you can't activate monster effects in the hand. You get to draw two cards instead of one, and you can summon twice instead of once. And duel just means this game, I assume.
Duel means the game. Correct.
What is activating monster effects in the hand?
So similar to the Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, that was a card that activates in the hand. Yeah.
I see. So you can't use those effects.
That type of effect, yes.
I'm gonna guess this got banned. This card looks pretty strong. I mean, drawing 2 a turn and summoning 2 a turn seems like a pretty strong advantage, and it has other effects too. Like you can banish it to protect your monster effects, or that you stop them from doing monster effects. Yeah, I'm gonna guess Time Tearing Morganite is banned.
This is like a control player's wet dream, huh?
Oh yeah.
Well, interestingly enough, this card is not banned. This card is a very new card. I think it came out within the past couple years, I want to say. And something you alluded to a little bit earlier, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just too fast for a card like this. So anytime us card game players be like, whoa, we get to draw 2 cards per turn, or we get to, bend the rules and normal summon twice, it's just not good enough. If you're playing a sort of stun deck, let's say, that's playing a bunch of cards like that Vanity's Emptiness card I showed you earlier, or a bunch of cards to really lock the opponent down from playing the game, then a card like Morganite could be useful in a deck like that, because you need to prolong the game because you're not going to win automatically. You have to do little by little chip damage. But that's really the only type of deck that really benefits from this card. Just Yu-Gi-Oh's way too fast that the games end really before you get to see the full benefit of a card like this.
Crazy.
Yeah. Well, everyone freaked out when we first saw this card on release because we're like, this is insane. And then no one played it.
That's funny.
Couple more left. Speaking of potentially oppressive cards, here's another one for you.
Mystic Mine. It's a spell. If your opponent controls more monsters than you do, your opponent can't activate monster effects or declare an attack. If you control more monsters than your opponent does, you cannot activate monster effects or declare an attack. Oh, is this a continuous spell?
So this is a field spell, which is basically the same as a continuous spell, where when you play it, it stays on the field permanently until something moves it to the graveyard, essentially. It just has its own designated zone.
If both players control the same number of monsters, destroy this card. You know what? I'm actually going to guess this got banned as well. This looks really, really obnoxious. Like, if you can just play a deck with very few or no monsters, I guess I don't know if you can actually make one with 0, but like you can. Yeah, you can make it so this card just looks like it very, very cheaply locks down all their stuff, and it even stops monster effects. Yeah, I don't think this one. This one doesn't pass the smell test for me. I think this got banned.
I can't even hide it. I can't even hide it. Yeah, you're right. This got banned. So Mystic Mine's a very controversial card in Yu-Gi-Oh! So the main way this got used, initially, similar to what you were saying about how you could play a deck with no monsters, initially burn decks, as a matter of fact, took advantage of this. So what they would do is they would, once their opponent committed 1 monster to the field, they would activate the Mystic Mine, and now all of a sudden the opponent couldn't use monster effects or declare an attack. So it's like the ultimate stall card in that regard. And then they would just use other spell or trap cards that would whittle down the opponent's life points, and the opponent would just sit there not being able to do anything, since most of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is very monster effect centric.
There's a burn deck in Magic that uses a card called Ensnaring Bridge that basically says neither player can attack, and it's the same thing. It's just like you sit there and you just burn them out while no creatures can do anything.
So that's where it started. What ended up happening was then competitive play, because the Mystic Mine burn deck, it saw success, but very limited success.
Yeah.
What happened, though, is that the competitive players who were playing the good decks realized, wait a second. If we're going second, we can board this card in. The opponent does their opening turn by playing some monsters. If we can just get Mystic Mine to stick, we just win the game from deck out, because the opponent most likely doesn't have a way to out this card that isn't through a monster effect. And that became incredibly oppressive, where the game plan became, all right, out my Mystic Mine or I win the game via deck out. And it was very obnoxious, as you said. I couldn't even hide it. All right, last one, and I think this is the one that everyone's going to be looking forward to the most.
Maxx C. This is a monster. It's a 500/200. It's pretty small. During either player's turn, you can send this card from your hand to your graveyard. This turn, each time your opponent special summons a monster, draw a card, and you can only use one of these per turn. Do you have to do this preemptively? Like if they start to special summon, if they special summon, can you like respond by doing this and draw a card?
So there's two answers to that question, so I'll give you both sides of it. There are two different types of special summons. There are ones that start a chain, and there are some that don't, or rather in Magic terms, like start a window to open the stack, let's say. So some monsters can just immediately be special summoned where there's no window for you to have a response. But you could respond after that monster is summoned, if that makes sense. Then there are special summons, and I would say these are the majority of the case, that they activate or an effect is activated. You have a chance to respond, and then that monster will be special summoned, if that makes sense.
Yeah, this looks like it's a card that got banned to me, because if most of the time you can even just respond, like you just start with this in your hand, they special summon, you respond, draw a card. Now if they special summon again, you just draw another card. So like they're in a position where they either have to like constrain themselves and not play stuff, and then to stop you from drawing cards, you already got a free card out of this, or you exchanged it for one card. And sometimes they're going to be forced to play multiple things, so this ends up just drawing you multiple cards. I guess the reason I would say this is banned is you just get to play max copies of this. Special summoning is such a big part, and whoever draws more of this is just going to end up with a pretty big advantage at relatively low cost. So that would be the reason I would think this got banned.
Does Magic have anything similar to this? I know that Magic just has like summons. You know, there's not like different types of summons, but does Magic have any card similar to this?
I me's a card like this that you play it stays in play, and when they play a non-creature spell, you draw a card. So like when they play a spell, basically. But that card's called Mystic Remora. You have to pay the upkeep. Like every turn, you have to pay more and more resources just to keep it in play. Whereas this is just free and just happens right away. So this card looks pretty strong to me.
Well, LSV, you are correct for your final card. You hit the nail on the head. Maxx is probably the most divisive card in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! It was printed quite a long time ago. I think it was like 2010, 2011-ish. Similar to Vanity's Emptiness, it didn't see play initially because special summoning wasn't nearly as prolific, let's say, as it is nowadays. You would maybe only special summon a couple times a turn. Now, Yu-Gi-Oh! You special summon a lot per turn. But Maxx, as you said, it puts you in this annoying conundrum where as soon as you commit to your first special summon of the turn, they activate Maxx in response. Well, they're probably going to immediately trade 1-for-1 just there with the Maxx. And now you have to engage with what we like to call the Maxx challenge. Do you further commit into it and you try to like essentially either kill them that turn or put yourself in a position where you feel like you have a fighting chance, weighing that against how many cards they might draw? Or do you just pass the turn and hope that, you know, you're not going to get killed on the crackback because you weren't able to really set up any of your plays that turn? And it is an incredibly frustrating card to play against for all those aforementioned reasons. It's really like, it's pick your poison, right? Do you want to lose or do you want to lose most of the time? It's not very fun. What's fascinating about this card is that it's been banned for us here in the TCG for quite some time, but in Japan and the Asian territories, it's actually still legal at 3 copies, which is absurd because there are cards to counter this. For instance, the Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring I showed you earlier, that is actually a card you can use in response to counter the Maxx because it is a card that would add cards from deck to hand. There are a few other cards that could potentially counter it as well. But there's a running joke that as soon as, if you're playing a deck in the Asian territories, you're just going to immediately put 3 Maxx, 3 Ash Blossom, and all the other cards that counter Maxx because it's that oppressive of a card that it's kind of bewildering that Konami Asia hasn't banned the card yet for them. And it has one of the highest play rates on Master Duel as well. I think it's like 93% of decks play this card.
The great part is you decide to like play it slow. You don't want them to draw a bunch of cards. The next turn they just have another one and you're in the same position again, except you're now a further turn behind. Yeah,
precisely.
This card, I think the best Magic analogy was there's a card in Magic called Mental Misstep, which was basically for free. It's 0 cost, which again in Magic is a rarity. Counter target spell that costs 1, so it counters a cheap spell.
Okay.
But Mental Misstep, basically when it was legal, everyone just played 4 copies because they traded with each other. So it was just like who drew more was a big deal, and I would imagine this card would be similar.
It's also frustrating too because in the instance of let's say you get to go first, your opponent doesn't have Maxi, and you're able to establish whatever first turn board. Your opponent starts their turn, you have Maxi. Now they're in the conundrum, because now it's like, well, I need to play the game, but if I play the game, they're just going to draw 50 cards, and next turn I'm just dead. I'm just drowning in card advantage at that point. So it is an incredibly frustrating card to play against. No one enjoys it. We don't know why Konami Asia keeps it legal, but yeah, we think it was a design mistake at the end of the day.
Oh, I certainly agree.
Well, LSV, thank you so much. I hope you had fun. I think your analysis was almost spot on with a majority of these. How do you feel about how you did?
I think I did pretty good. I think that there were some cards here that I was surprised to find weren't banned, like Solemn Judgment, but I guess waiting a turn on that effect is pretty big. And overall, yeah, like it's funny just thinking about how these cards compare to Magic cards, because one of the things that I think a lot of people would be surprised by is how innocuous some cards are that do end up getting banned. Like draw 3, discard 2 doesn't seem like a card on its face is like, wow, this is better than like a huge monster, but that's just kind of how the rules system works. And I'm not surprised that some of the like cheaper, easier to play cards and that have very low opportunity costs ultimately are the ones that end up getting banned.
Sure. And you could probably notice, too, that they slowly learned from their design mistakes previously by starting to add these. You can only activate, this card once per turn. You can only use it once per turn, different things like that. That was sort of the limiter on a lot of the power of these cards, is that since obviously we don't have a mana system, the cards are our resource, right? So make it so that you can only use a majority of these cards once in a given turn was a way to sort of curb the power. But then we got some of the most ridiculous cards you've probably ever seen that if you apply them to Magic terms would be absurd.
Definitely.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I will have all your links down in the description so people can check you out, your channel, the podcast, all that. And any closing thoughts about Yu-Gi-Oh?
No, this was a lot of fun though. I see why people play. Like there's a lot of cool stuff going on, and I appreciate you having me on. This was a fun experience to kind of look at a game which surprisingly I haven't ever really played, because I've played almost all the other games in some form or fashion, but I guess just I never got into Yu-Gi-Oh. So it may be the perfect subject to look at these cards and decide whether or not I thought they were too good.
Well, we can always have you back on if you want to learn a little bit more. So
for sure.
Let us know. So guys, that's going to wrap it up for another video. I really hope you all enjoyed. Let's go ahead and shout the patrons for all of their continued support. So shoutouts to Shout1317, Sim00x3, MBT Play Medolce, Moto, Cameron L. Smith, The Synchro Guy, Pony Stark, Dan the Man Hoban, Little Fadeleaf, Draconic, Dylan Rare Hunter, JW11860, Brian Dancer of Class 7, Flannel Daddy, Twinkle Muncher, literally all of the guinea pigs, Cheeks McLapperty, Stolfin Amethyst, Wonder Waffle, MBT canceled by community soon, canceled by all committee soon, canceled by all players soon, Corvain, absolute angriest peacock of the Edison Club, Daniel Howell, and life keeps using solemn judgment on my hopes and dreams. Thank you all so much again for watching, and we will see you next time.